I'm not.
I'm bringing it back to you now, Margaret. Try it now.
That looks better. There we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so our agenda. So starting your business, working with other businesses, hiring, firing. We're going to talk about those. Developing business, protecting your information, contracting and performing, and then ultimately a little bit about the False Claims Act. We'll go through this now. So starting your business. Perhaps some of you are just thinking about starting your business and then others have already started, but I think these will be some good reminders. So one of the things is, as business owners, there always seems to be a problem out there on the forefront. And I'm a business owner as well, and I worked in business for years. And so it's always about solving a problem, whether it's solving your own problem, solving the problem of the customer, but it's always about solving some sort of problem or challenge, which is what I find interesting and rewarding. And I also find, though, that once you see the problem, then you're on your path to trying to solve it or fix it or give a solution. But you got to first identify it and know that it's out there. And so I always tell my clients, get the landscape and have an understanding of what concerns or what risks you need to keep your eyeballs on. And then if you do that, you don't have to know the answer. You don't have to know the law. You don't have to know the requirement. You just have to know what to be alert for. And so that's what I'm going to try to touch on today. Some things for you to be alert to and some basic things of how to handle items that you need to be alert to as a federal government contractor or as starting out as a federal government contractor. So starting your business. What can go wrong? So what problems can occur? And I'm going to share with you some experiences I've had with some clients that I've worked with that may be a good notice or a good warning for you. And here's something that I've encountered. Obtaining your 8A status. You hire a consultant to help you pursue your 8A status. You pay them. You give them all the documents that they ask for. Months go by and you never, ever hear from them. Very disheartening, very upsetting. Same thing when registering in SAM. So new businesses have to register in SAM, but all of you who are currently government contractors need to make sure that you keep your registration current. Same thing can happen there. You hire a consultant, pay them, you never hear from them. Curtis and I talked about this yesterday as we worked on the deck together and how disheartening this is and not good. So first off, remember SAM, you don't need to pay anybody to register you for SAM. You can go and do your own SAM registration. It's a little bit cumbersome and take some time, but you can absolutely do it yourself. Same for 8A. But Curtis did provide some resources here. You're going to get the slide deck so you can go call these up. Small Business Administration is there to support you all. That's where you go for your certification to be an 8A, veteran-owned business. The Association of Procurement Technology Assistance Centers, Apex Accelerators, their whole purpose is to support small businesses and other businesses with government contracting. They are a great resource. Some of the states that do these have these assistance centers. Virginia has a fabulous one. New Jersey does. You could get on their mailing list, get their newsletters, get all their trainings, and then you can also go meet with them for guidance. They're excellent. Service Corps of Retired Executives, they're really good too. They really are retired executives and they volunteer to help businesses who are starting off or have some challenges as they're growing or want some assistance. So those are some resources to go to. I'm also going to put on here the lawyers, and I always try to let clients know about working with lawyers. I know working with lawyers can seem like it's a pain because lawyers can be a pain, people think, and lawyers seem to cost a lot more money than consultants, or maybe even cost more than what people think we're worth. But a couple things on that. So lawyers, yes, we can help solve problems after they happen, but we can also be there to support you as you scale. We could be there to support you to add value, and we can be there to help you as a strategic business advisor. And one item before I get into why lawyers cost so darn much is the fact that calling your lawyer before you have a problem or when you see maybe a problem on the horizon is a million times less expensive than calling us after whatever happened. So keep that in mind. And hopefully today we'll cover some issues that maybe you'll know when, oh, I got to be careful and look out for that. So why do lawyers cost and charge so much? Number one, we go through tons of years of school. Number two, we have a lot of, like, if we compare us to somebody who's not a lawyer, we have a lot of rules of ethics that we got to live by when we work with all of you. We've got to maintain your confidentiality. We have to avoid conflicts of interest. Lots of times a client will say when they get my engagement letter, can you please put a conflict of interest clause in there? My answer is no, there's no need, because under our rules of being a lawyer, we absolutely have to avoid conflicts of interest. It just goes without saying. We manage your documents and have to do them a certain way and always give them back to you. If you ever switch lawyers, make sure your lawyer gives you your stuff and then you could take it to your new lawyer. We also hold your funds in what's called an IOLTA, or a trust account. So if you pay us in advance, we have to hold your funds in a special account and then only retrieve those funds out of that account after we give you an invoice. Those are a little bit of protections for you as a business, so that give you some assurance your lawyer's not going to run off with your money. And then there's a place always to go to file complaints against lawyers. Each state has a place to go. So it's those sorts of items that give you a little bit of an assurance when you're working with a lawyer that they're not going to run off with your money. And the other reason lawyers charge so much is oftentimes we're called upon when a business is facing some of the most serious things it can face. And that's a lot of pressure for us and a lot of brain power, and calls upon our years of experience and education. And that is a costly proposition to try to work with a lawyer on that front. So as government contractors, think whether you're new or starting off, one of the things the government wants you all to be able to do is be responsible. That word responsible is actually a legal term. It's in the regulations. The federal acquisition regulations say government contractors have to be responsible. But responsible is defined in the regulations. It says you got to have a satisfactory history of performing your contracts, that you have to have a history of being ethical and honest, that you have to have the accounting and financial systems in place to run your business and to perform the contract, have the required administrative and operational controls, have the technical capability to perform the contract, have enough resources to perform your contract from a financial perspective, be able to meet the requirements of the contract. Those are the things that you need to think about and make sure that you have in place when you're a government contractor. Now, prime contractors, if you're ever going to be a prime, you got to remember that you're certifying that your subcontractors who you have selected meet these requirements. If you're a sub and you're looking to prime or be a mentor protege with somebody, they're going to ask you, the primes will expect you to make some sort of representation or some sort of proof that you all have these requirements in place. And think about this, when your guys are government contractors, you're getting paid with taxpayer dollars. And so these little quotes that I have here, the government business should be conducted in a manner above reproach. You must be impartial with the highest degree of public trust. And that's because you're an extension of the government and you're getting paid with taxpayer dollars. So as government contractors, you have to think two things to yourself. What are the laws and how do I follow them for my business? But second, you have to think to yourself, am I making decisions that are decisions of integrity? Am I operating ethically? Am I being honest? Aside from the legal and regulatory requirements, because the government expects that all of government contractors. So another thing about starting a business or a small business where I see businesses run afoul at times is governance. Lawyers, we call it governance. But really what it is the fact that a business is a person. That's a very lawyer thing to say. So what does that actually mean? Your business is a separate entity in the eyes of the law than the persons who own the business. And a business has rights. They have the right to enter a contract. They have the right to open bank accounts. They can write checks. They can engage in the political process through campaign contributions or lobbying. Campaign contributions, you got to be careful and do that the right way. Same with lobbying. But these are all the things a business can do. And so in the eyes of the law, a business is an entity separate and apart from the people that own it. So as business owners, you need to make sure that you separate yourself from your business. It may protect you from individually getting sued, not always, but it may. And you need to show that you have a formal business structure. There's defined roles and responsibilities in your business. You have like a board of directors to help you run your business. You keep accurate books and records. You have policies and procedures. You have some way to govern or manage your business, and it should be separate from who you are as a person. If you merge your business in with your personal life and your personal finances, for example, and you don't have what us lawyers call corporate formalities showing that you have this separate business and it indeed is a business, it can result in problems for you as a government contractor where you're not being considered responsible because you don't have the structure you're supposed to have in place. But it also makes it more likely for someone to be able to go after you or sue you individually. That could still happen if you have a business and you keep it separate, but it's more likely and it's more of a problem when you're merging yourself with your business. So that's an important thing to remember as business owners. Okay, working with other businesses. Even if you're just starting out, you may look for opportunities to work with another business. I always get this questions from my client, Margaret, can you draft us up a contract so that this other business will not screw me over, will not do something wrong, will not cause problems for me, will not ruin my good name, they'll perform or they'll pay or whatever it is that you want to have in the contract? And my answer always to that question is actually, no, I can't, because even the world's most perfectly written contract will not stop one bad business from doing something wrong to your business. So if you're the one that is expecting payment from the other business, you do the performance and then they never pay you, the best contract in the world, if they have no intention of paying you, is not going to make them pay you. So before you even start thinking about contracting with another business, use your spidey sense. Think to yourself, how do I know this business? Do I have good conversations with them? Do we communicate in a way where we understand each other? Can I trust them? Are they ethical? Do they seem like they're honest? Do they seem like they are interested in following the laws? How did I get to know them? Did they come referred to me from a colleague who I respect and who I think knows what's going on out there in the world? Those sorts of due diligence questions to ask yourself and to consider ever before you enter a contract is probably the best thing you can do when deciding who you're going to do a contract with. Now, for another day, when we do part 2, where I'm going to talk about exports and working globally, we'll talk more about the due diligence you should do on your business partners, because there's a lot more than what I just said. You know, using your spidey senses, there's some very concrete investigative things you can do. And you really should do that. If you're doing a joint venture with somebody or some sort of other substantial relationship with another business, you should do far more extensive due diligence on them to make sure you know exactly who you're signing up for. And as federal government contractors, one of the things you need to check about is making sure you don't do business with a business or a person who's either proposed for debarment or who is debarred. So with that, use your spidey senses. And if your spidey senses say, I can count on this business and its owners and its employees, then maybe you want to think about contracting with them. But things can still go wrong even if you pick the best business in the world, especially for you all. I'm assuming that most of you are either veteran-owned businesses, small businesses, service disabled veteran-owned businesses or something like that, or that's what you want to be. You could still be considered in violation of the law if you affiliate with another business. So if you have certain relationships with other businesses or other persons even, and those relationships are so extensive, the government will say that your small business, your small veteran-owned business, is affiliated with another business to the degree that you're no longer considered a small business. And if the government concludes you're affiliated or wants to investigate you for being affiliated, it is not a good thing, because if they conclude that you are affiliated with another business, You will lose your status as a small veteran-owned business, but you will also potentially suffer civil and even sometimes criminal ramifications if there was a lot of fraud going on. So you want to make sure that you do not become affiliated, as the law defines it, with another business, with another person, with another investor. So say your good friend wants to invest a lot of money in your business and it's the majority of the money and you're the vet, you're on your way to becoming affiliated and not being considered a small business. The other thing that can happen when you get investors into your business is your business is wildly successful. They'll want more money. If your business fails and they invested and they lose their investment, they're going to want money and they're going to sue you. So those are some challenges that you face as a small veteran-owned business. So I already sort of talked about affiliation. Affiliation means that you've sort of exploited your special position in the market. The government's giving you a special position as a veteran-owned business or a service-disabled business or a small business, woman-owned, something like that. They want you to truly be veteran-owned or service-disabled veteran-owned. However, as I said, if you develop certain relationships with other businesses and other persons, the government may consider that you're not really a veteran-owned business because somebody else is controlling you, somebody else is managing you, somebody else is invested in you to the degree that it's not your business. You are doing too much work with another large business. There's all sorts of ways that the government can point to show that your small business in the eyes of the government is no longer considered small. So some ways, a joint venture. No, we just got a call from or a question from Paula. I think I can answer it, Brendan. No, I'm not saying you should not pursue joint ventures. I'm saying that you have to be thoughtful about it. So let me give you an example. You joint venture with another business and the joint venture is always the prime and you're always the sub, or something of that nature, and you have zero business with any other business. The only thing you ever do, every shred of your business is run through the joint venture. The joint venture members have a substantial investment in your business. The joint venture members have a substantial management authority over your business. They have a lot of interest in your business from management, from financial, from control. Then the government is going to start thinking to themselves, you're not really your own freestanding small business, because those are signs that you may be affiliated with another business to the degree that you're not operating freely on your own. So it's a matter of, I have a little phrase, totality of the circumstances. It's a matter of degree and it's a matter of the circumstances. So again, if you have a prime or subcontract relationship with a joint venture, and that's the only business you ever do, and those joint venture members have say in how you manage your business, how you control your business, that they're heavily invested in your business, then you may be on your way to impacting your status as a small business. So you got to be alert for it and maintain those separations and not get too enmeshed with another business or another person.
Hey, Margaret, I got a few questions, and I just wanted to let everyone know this applies to all social and economic categories as far as small business, even
Yes.
though we're
Yes.
part of Veteran Affairs, we veterans first, but not vets only. So just to make that clear, I don't want anybody to get confused and thinking this was just only for veterans. But it's
Thank
a
you,
few
thank
questions.
you,
We
Curtis.
want to answer a couple of them now or wait till later.
No, I'm happy to answer some questions now.
Okay. One says good program and great information. Are joint ventures for a specific project less risky?
Oh my gosh, some of these questions, I'm going to lawyer up on you guys. Some of these questions are going to be so complicated, I can't answer them here. I will answer that with joint venture for one project. Really think through that. I'm going to put my business hat on that one. A joint venture for one single contract, pursuing one single contract, may not be worth the joint venture. You may be better off doing prime sub, right? Because there's a lot that goes into joint ventures. Hugh Cooper is noting that talking to a lawyer before a joint venture, it's a very good idea because A, you don't want to be considered affiliated, and B, your joint venture operating agreement needs to be done in a way that it protects your interests, complies with small business laws and regulations. And then, the joint venture is another separate entity as well. So you're going to have to register your venture, you know, in a state as a business, etc. So short answer on forming a joint venture to pursue one opportunity, think through it. Is it worth the time and money of forming a JV, or are you better off prime and sub?
Thank you. Next question. As an SDV or SB, do I also qualify as an 8-8 if I'm not a minority race?
Well, if you're and Curtis and Wendy jump in too, as Curtis said, you know, our discussion here covers woman-owned, SDVOSB, veteran-owned. All of these sort of socioeconomic status businesses are considered small and considered available to get the special set-asides by the government in your ownership.
Thank you.
Hey Curtis,
Where
what
do we?
question? I'm sorry, what question was that again?
They was asking if they was an SDV or SB, do they also qualify for an 8-8 if they're not a minority race?
Oh, okay. So yeah, just to, because I heard, I apologize, I am working in the background too, but I heard Margaret mention some of the information that she stated. But yes, your socioeconomic classifications, as far as it being 8A, it's not based on race or ethnicity. If you go to the SBA website, and I can pull the information up and post it for that question, but there are specific criteria for 8A. And also
Yes.
with Hub Zone, and it's based on your. I'm not even gonna go any further because I don't want to mistakenly state it, but I will post the information, as a matter of fact, in the chat for anybody else that may have a question about the differences between the socioeconomic classifications. But as far as your socioeconomic classifications for businesses, if you meet those criteria, you could be a service disabled veteran-owned business. You could also have, even though we don't have a federal minority business certification, those usually are issued out by state. They you can have a socioeconomic classification or certification for your business for minority owned, women owned, AA or Hub Zone, or any other, because there are other certifications that are out there. So I just wanted to piggyback off of what Margaret said to add that in there. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Wendy.
No,
No
thank you,
problem.
Wendy. That's very helpful. And keep in mind, just being, sometimes you can get, we call it in the federal government contracting space, the set asides just as being a small, right? Like, just if you're small in your industry based on what you goods and services you provide, sometimes that gets you a special set aside. So it Wendy will post it. It's complicated how to label yourselves, but there are a variety of ways where you could get special set asides and get those special considerations from the government. And I see, I'm service disabled veteran. How do I get certification? I believe, Curtis, that's the link that we provided earlier in this slide here today.
Yeah, so I was going to say the links in the slide today. Everybody will get a copy of the slide deck, and you can review the slide deck and go to the certified website. Last question.
In the chat too.
And Wendy posted it in the chat as well. So last question before we move on. This for you, Margaret. Where do we look to find an attorney that works in the field?
Well, I work in this field, but there's a ton others. If I can't help you for whatever reason, I could get you names of other lawyers. Wendy and Curtis may have lawyers who they know do this sort of work. So you can also, I don't know, Wendy and Curtis, you can, if you guys have lists of lawyers, you can also sort of Google lawyers, veteran or federal government contracting lawyers. Most federal government contracting lawyers can help with your certification status, with your joint venture status, etc.
And to piggyback off of what Margaret said, we don't have a list of lawyers, but if you go on USA.gov, they actually do have, and this may be specific to veteran-owned businesses. They do have like a list of attorneys that may be able to assist you in those different areas. It's not just specific to doing with small business or doing business in general, but you should be able to identify an attorney or a lawyer off of that information, because they do have a list of that. And they do have like a list for affordable. So if you just go to affordable attorneys, if you go to USA.gov.
And then I did see we had a question about up there about it's sort of got lost because it's so far away, but like around investments in your business from joint venture, from private equity, from family members, can that defeat any of these statuses? That's what I'll say now. Small business, 8A, veteran, any of these statuses. It can, and it's an incredibly complicated analysis to do about how much investment may turn you into not being considered a special status anymore. Suffice it to say, think about it like this. The government, if you're telling the government, for example, I'm a veteran-owned business, or I'm a disabled veteran-owned business, or I'm a small business, they want to be sure that it actually is you, the veteran, running the business, and that you're not getting funded by some other organization or individual as like the front person to try to get special set-aside contracts. That's what the government's trying to avoid. If the government is giving special considerations to certain types of businesses based on their owners, they don't want you to be the front person for private equity or for other individuals investing or for other companies investing in you. And it requires a little bit more of a drill down on that. But I think the small business link that we provide in the slide, I think it gives you some information on that. We already talked about this slide here, deciding whether you should team or partner, do business with somebody. We talked about using their reputation, looking at their reputation. And making sure you feel comfortable with them, because even the world's best contractor isn't going to take care of you doing business with somebody that you don't trust or who's unreliable or is violating the law. Okay, moving together along through the slide deck here, what are some of the kind of requirements or agreements that you should think about having in place as a business when you're getting started? You need to have bylaws, and you need to have your corporate structure, that sort of governance. If you are going to have investors, you're going to have shareholder agreements. Even if you're the only shareholder, there should be some explanation of how your ownership of the business is laid out. Operating agreements are something that you put into place if you have other persons invested in your business. If you're a joint venture, you're going to have an operating agreement as well. Employment agreements are a good initial contract to have also. Subcontracting agreements, teaming agreements, vendor agreements. These are good agreements to have when you're starting off your business, and you can have a template for all of these sorts of contracts. And then you can oftentimes, once you have a good template, like a good subcontracting agreement template, you often can sort of make that such that other people, that you could adapt it as needed, but with a caveat, right? We'll get to writing contracts later in here. You know, your fixed price subcontracting agreement isn't going to be very useful when you're doing like a labor hours subcontract agreement. So some terms and conditions will stay the same, but also terms and conditions will change depending on what sort of business you're going to have. Okay. Non-disclosure agreements. I'll stop in a little bit, Curtis, and we can answer some questions in a little bit. Non-disclosure agreements are a super important agreement for you to have, even when you're having initial discussions about being a prime or a sub, initial discussions about teaming with each other, initial discussions about a joint venture. A non-disclosure agreement is important because you don't want to be sharing information about your business's financials, your business's capabilities, unless you have an agreement that the other entity that you're talking with is not going to disclose your confidential information. Your confidential information needs to be protected. And your non-disclosure agreement should define that you're both going to secure each other's information. You're going to define what confidentiality means. You're going to define what information each of you are going to protect, how long it's going to last, etc. But that's an important thing to have in place when you start talking to somebody else.
1 second, Margaret. Can y'all put a thumbs up in the chat? Give me a thumbs up in the reaction if you can see the slide deck. I see someone in the chat said they can't see the slides. Awesome, I see it coming in. Thank you. If you are able to see the slides, try to go back out and come back in and see if that works. But thank you. Sorry, Margaret.
That's all right, Curtis. We're getting a lot of thumbs up, and that's great. Okay. So one of the things that federal government contractors often wonder about or ask about is teaming agreements. Teaming agreement the federal acquisition regulations actually talk about teaming agreements. They talk about businesses teaming up together to add the best value for the government for any particular opportunity. So, teaming agreements. Think to yourself, what is the opportunity? What do you want to team with this other business to do? Why do you want a team? Always ask yourself that as a business person. Like we talked about it on joint venture. Always ask yourself from a business perspective, push the law aside entirely. From a business perspective, why do you want to do what you want to do? Why do you want to enter a teaming agreement with another business? And what are going to be the benefits to you? What are going to be the risks to you of entering a teaming agreement? And think about that strategically before you enter a teaming agreement with another entity. Once you do that, if you're going to team together to pursue a particular opportunity, then you got to decide, is it exclusive or not? Do you want to say to each other, we're only going to team with each other and we're not going to submit proposals with any other business? Are you going to try to guarantee the teaming partner a scope of work, or will you be guaranteed your own self some sort of scope of work if you get awarded the contract? How are you going to allocate costs, right? So if you're teaming with somebody and you're going to write up a proposal and your business is going to take the lead on writing that proposal, what do you want the other business to contribute, right? Because if your side of the equation, your business is doing all the work to write the proposal, all the market research, everything else, then you should make sure that there's some sort of allocation of those costs. Who's going to interact with the government on behalf of the team, like negotiate if the government wants to negotiate? How are you going to protect your intellectual property? What about publicity? Like if you team up with another business, do you want them to go out and issue all these press releases about teaming? How is the teaming agreement going to end? Is it end? How can you terminate it? Can it end when you get your contract signed, etc.? And will there be a subcontract and what it will look like? So your teaming agreement is something where you're thinking about prime or sub with another business and you're going to go after the work together, but you haven't been awarded the work. You're going to team up to pursue the opportunity with the federal government, and you should put an agreement and a contract in place for how you're going to do that. I will move on teaming agreements. Here's another thing to think about when you're getting ready to work with another business. You have to think to yourself, is the other business a subcontractor? Or if you're going to be the one, like if there's a prime that you're getting ready to work with, you got to think to yourself, is the other business a subcontractor? Are they a vendor or are they a consultant? Why does this even matter? Because the federal government views vendors, subcontractors, and consultants differently. If you're going to be a subcontractor or you're going to have somebody be a subcontractor when you're the prime, then the regulations for federal government contracts are going to describe exactly what you need to have in your subcontract and require certain things of you as a prime contractor as you oversee and manage that subcontractor. You've got to be fair and impartial in how you select your subcontractors. You got to make sure that they're doing a good job, that their invoices are accurate and complete. And then if you are going to be the subcontractor to a large business, they may be using you to meet their requirements, because just as the government has to work with a certain set number of small businesses of all different sorts, as we talked about, big, huge prime contractors have to do the same thing as well. Big prime contractors are supposed to use small businesses to meet their subcontracting requirements. And because of that, you guys, if you guys are all small businesses of one maker model, remember, you bring a lot of value to a prime, A, because hopefully you provide a good quality product or service, but B, because the big government contractors need to work with small businesses. They're supposed to work with small businesses when they deliver the goods and the service to the government. So remember that. So you do have some bargaining power with these big primes. One last thing before we answer a couple questions is this. Your business partners, your prime or your sub, you guys, you have to add value to the transaction. Sometimes I get clients who say to me, well, I'm going to hire, I get this from big government contractors. I'm going to hire this, I'm going to include the subcontractor. They're just going to be, they're not going to do anything. They're just going to sit there to present to the government as I have a small business. Or the prime will say to the subcontractor, listen, we're the prime, we're not going to do anything. We want you sub to do everything, but you'd never win this award by yourself. So we'll win it as the prime and we'll just pass through everything to you. There has to be a legitimate aspect to that sub-prime relationship. The sub actually has to be doing something legitimate in performing that contract if you're a subcontractor. Somebody just asked me the question Patrick is asking, is there a way to distinguish between vendor and subcontractor? And is there a definition in the FAR? Oh, Patrick, but I wish there were a concrete definition in the FAR. Unfortunately, the FAR doesn't say definitively who a vendor is and who a subcontractor is. But the way to sort of think about it from a government contracting perspective, and it's sprinkled out in various parts of the FAR, subcontractors are actually helping perform the contract and do the deliverables of the contract and meet the specifications and the requirements of the prime contract. A vendor is sort of more generic in what services they provide a government contractor. So think about it like this. If you are a subcontractor, and the prime contract is to sell pencils to the government, and that contract for pencils to the government says the pencils have to be 5 inches long, they have to be a particular color of blue, and the eraser has to be yellow, and we want them delivered to us every other Friday. If you are a prime and you hire a business to deliver on that schedule or to help paint those pencils that color, etc., then that is a subcontractor. As opposed to you're a prime contractor and you just got to generally buy pencils for your business. And so you go out and you start hiring vendors to sell you pencils, generically untethered from a prime contract, then untethered from a prime contract, not helping meet prime contract deliverables makes you a vendor. Okay. So thinking about that, here is my warning on, oh, Patrick, you're welcome. Remember this. Breaking up is hard to do, whether it's breaking up a prime sub agreement, breaking up a joint venture, breaking up a teaming agreement. Breaking up is hard to do. Just as it is in our personal lives, breaking up is usually hard to do, emotionally or otherwise. It's hard in business. It should be your last resort. My clients are always wanting to break up their contracts. Oh, they're in breach, so we want to exercise our right to terminate the contract. No, don't go there for the first time. This goes back to my do business with businesses you trust, then form a good contract. And then if one of you is not doing something that the other one likes, and you think you're heading to problems, start communicating, just like in any relationship. Look at your contract. What does your contract tell you you can do? And what does the contract say the other party must do? And then your contract will tell you how you can make remedies if somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do. So you want to make sure that you work through and communicate and follow what happens in your contract before you start deciding to break up and accuse each other of breach and everything like that. It's just hard. So be wary of that. Okay, hiring and firing. Okay, what can go wrong? You have government information and one of your employees gives it to the media. You conduct a background check on somebody before you hire them and something turns up in their background check about some sort of criminal arrest, some sort of criminal activity. Can you still hire them or not is another issue. Two of your employees claim that the government client is acting inappropriately towards them. Your employee downloads all of your proprietary information and government information on the personal cloud. These are all sorts of examples of what can happen. What do you do about it? So here's the challenge about hiring and firing. It all depends on what state you're in. Most stuff around hiring and firing is driven by state law. So that's an important thing to remember. There are some federal laws and some federal contract clauses that tell you how to manage this, but it's mostly state law. When it comes to doing background checks and that sort of thing as a federal government contractor, your government contracts will tell you that. So like if you're a classified contractor, you're going to have very secure and serious requirements around people's histories. But if you're doing sensitive work for the government as well, getting into sensitive access on a government place, you may also have requirements around background checks, but you have to check because a lot of states now are trying and wanting to be very fair to people who either have been convicted or arrested. And it does not just because somebody's been convicted or arrested, it does not equal you absolutely cannot hire them. So you should talk to employment lawyers about that. You need to have policies and procedures around how you hire. You need to have policies and procedures for your employees so they know what to do. So if they do something they're not supposed to do, you have a good basis to show, here's what my policy says. You did not do it. You knew about my policy. Now we're going to exit you from the organization. And remember, even if a third party like the government is harassing your employees, you could still be liable for that if you don't take steps to take care of your employees. That's hiring and firing. One last thing for you all as government contractors, remember, recruiting and hiring from the government is a very special thing. The government doesn't want conflicts to occur between the work that they're doing and the work that you as a government contractor is doing. They want some fairness there. So for example, the easiest way to think about this is if you're a government contractor and your contracting officer says, I'm going to be retiring in about 2 months. I would love to come and work for you. You need to put the kibosh on that conversation immediately because there are criminal conflict of interest laws that say you can't recruit and hire your contracting officer and they shouldn't be doing it for you. And here's the thing, people get punished for it. Some big famous companies. Boeing got in big trouble for recruiting a person involved in contracting and source selection. Gallup, the pollsters, they got in trouble for recruiting their contracting officer for FEMA. So it does happen. So if recruiting and hiring from the government, be sure you understand when and who you can recruit so you do not commit a criminal conflict of interest by recruiting somebody that has some involvement with your contract. And I'm using that in the broadest sense of the terms. And let's see, that is it on recruiting and hiring. I see, Curtis, that we have some questions piled up. I can answer some of them, but I'm trying to get through all of our slides too.
Keep going. You can keep going.
Okay, I'll just quickly answer on the clearance. I see there's some questions in there on the clearance, and somebody says that your business needs to get a clearance. Yes, if you're going to do cleared contracts, your business has to get, as Christy says, a facility security clearance. So your company has to get cleared. And then your employees in the company also have to get a personal security clearance. So it's two things. Your company has to get a clearance. Your employees have to get a clearance. Okay, developing business. Issues can arise here. You get to know the government contractors or other people in the business, in the government, and they ask you to draft the scope of work and they tell you the budget for the scope of work and you go ahead and you draft it up and you turn it into them. That could be a huge problem. You know, the government client gives you their resume, asks you to review their resume and give them hints on how to improve it and to send it around your network so that they can get hired. That could be a problem. You heard some damaging information about your competitor, or you see some damaging information about a competitor, or your client, your employees are posting damaging information about your competitor online, on social media. Your competitor's lawyer can call. The IG calls you about happy hours with government employees. These are all sorts of things that can brew up as you engage and do business with the government contracting. Very quickly, I see that Susan writes and wants to know how to get a facility clearance. You should go to, I'll see if I can multitask and put it in here, defense contract, wait a minute, defense counterintelligence security agency. If you Google that, also known as DCSA, if you Google that, it'll tell you about how to get a facility clearance and personal security clearances. Okay, back to our slides. Meals, happy hours, and corruption. So corruption is offering, promising, exchanging anything of value in an effort to get business from the government, keep business, or get the government to do some sort of favor for you. So refer back to my comment where I said a couple moments ago, your contracting officer says to you, here's my resume. Could you help me fix it up? Can you help me network? Can you send it out to your network? You've now just done something of value for your contracting officer. And prosecutors and others would think that that looks awfully suspicious, like you trying to keep your business as a government contractor. That's corruption, where you're giving something to the government or you're trying to give something to the government in order to keep your business or get new business. And remember, beyond corruption laws, which are crimes, there's also ethics laws and FAR regulations, acquisition regulations, which are in your contract, that tell you as a government contractor, you can't give the government meals, you can't take them out to happy hour, you can't give them favors, we talked about that, you can't give them cash or gift cards, you can't give them gifts over $20. Because the government, again, wants that ethics and objectivity, and doing these sorts of things can seem as favoritism rather than actually getting awarded because of some objective reason. I'll cover conflicts of interest very quickly. There's two types. Your organization, your entity, your business can have a conflict with the government, or there could be personal conflicts of interest. The government wants you and your business to be very objective, and they want to be objective as well. Remember, when it comes to conflicts of interest, the appearance of a conflict is almost just as bad as the conflict itself. So a bit more on this. Organizational conflicts are created. That is a conflict for your whole company. If you help the government draft an RFP, you're creating a conflict of interest because you're going to draft the RFP. And if you're going to turn on bid on the RFP, it's like you set the rules of the game and the government says that's unfair. If you do something for the government, you help them develop an IT infrastructure, and then you get hired to come in and audit that infrastructure, that's unfair because you wouldn't be objective of your own work. If you get access to non-public government information about source selection or other things, or non-public information about your competitors, whether you use it in a bad way or not, that's a conflict and you can't have that either. So you got to look out for those things. Personal conflicts, I sort of talked on this, you guys, when I talked about not hiring your contracting officer, but it's more than that. People in the government generally shouldn't be investing in your business. You shouldn't hire people in the government, spouses and children, to work in your business. You got to watch out for these sort of personal conflicts as well. Moving on to protecting your assets. Your assets, by assets, I mean everything. I mean your money, but also your intellectual property, how you approach proposal development, who your vendors are, who your business partners are, who your customers are. You can have problems when your employee quits and takes your customer list. The government passes your software. I've had this before where you sell software to the government and then they pass it on to somebody, some other government offices when they're not really licensed to do that. Your IT system gets hacked. These are all the things you got to be looking out for as businesses. So think about it like this. You want to protect all the personal information you have. You want to protect when you go in the government facility, you want to protect your facilities, IT infrastructure. If you're a DoD contractor, you have very strict requirements around your IT security. Pretty soon all contractors will, but you got to make sure your IT is secure. Protecting intellectual property. The first thing you need to do on protecting your intellectual property is know what your intellectual property is. So like if you have software that you develop, have a list that where you track what your software is that you've developed. Know who owns intellectual property. If the government paid you to develop it, how is your ownership with the government? If you were hired by another business to create some intellectual property, software or video or something like that, who owns it, you or them? Make sure that you get a patent, trademark, or copyright, or mark your stuff that you own that's your intellectual property. All of your contracts should define who owns intellectual property. Intellectual property being anything you create, your trademark, etc. Procurement sensitive information is also something you guys need to protect. It's any non-public government procurement information. It's source selection plans, it's your competitors' cost and pricing. It's anything that's marked proprietary and sensitive. It includes your own stuff that you should mark as proprietary, sensitive, confidential, if indeed it is. So when you submit your proposals describing your detailed explanation of how you're going to perform a particular government contract or how your pricing is arranged and your costs are determined, that's your confidential information. It's proprietary, it's sensitive, you should mark it. If you get procurement sensitive information, competitor or government information about procurements, about source selection, about your competitor's IP, anything like that, you need to do a full stop and figure out how you're going to protect that and not use it in a negative way. And depending on the situation, you may even need to take more steps like letting people know you got it and that you're not using it in the wrong way. All right, contracting. Rich wants to know by market. Yes, put confidential, proprietary, business sensitive information in your documents when you believe that it is procurement, that it is your confidential business information. Okay, so contracting. There's all sorts of contracting and performing challenges you can have. The government asks you to go beyond the scope of work. Your contractor has pulled out. You run short of payroll, so you don't pay your taxes for a couple of quarters, and now you're not able to pay your employees or your subcontractors. These are all performance issues that can happen to you, but they can also happen to your subcontractors or your prime. What do you do about it? The first thing you look at is, what does your contract say? Whether you're the prime contract holder, your prime contract will give you guidance on all of this stuff. If you're not a prime contractor and you have a subcontract or some sort of other contract with another business, that contract should tell you what to do if somebody's not paying you, if employees are not getting paid, what sort of insurance you have to have, all of those things. What does your contract say? Now, here's the thing. Businesses will call up and they'll ask me to write a contract for them. And they have this view that in my files, somewhere I have a subcontract for fixed price services, or I have a contract for a software license. And that I could just take that, put your business's name in it in about 2 minutes, and then send it to you. But it doesn't work like that, because words are incredibly important for us lawyers. And here's an example of why. This little sign: students cook and serve grandparents. We know that the students did not cook their grandparents and then serve them for dinner. This little statement means the students were cooking a meal and then feeding it to their grandparents. But you could see this is poorly written, and so it could leave ambiguity or confusion. Or even a better example I have up is this one. Which one? See, the only difference between these two little statements is the comma right there. Let's eat, comma, grandpa is inviting your grandpa to dinner. This way means you're gonna like be a cannibal with your grandpa. Now imagine this in like a 10, a 15, or 20-page contract. This is what your lawyers are doing, making sure that these types of little phrases are not causing you or your business partner confusion. And that's why it takes so long for us lawyers to write a darn contract, because we're looking for this stuff. Like you say, I want them to pay me in 5 days. Okay, 5 business days or 5 calendar days. So this is the sort of thing that makes it such that a contract template is useful, and you can edit it and alter it and fix it and make it work for your business. But it is these small little things that you got to consider for your particular circumstance. Before signing up a contract as a prime contractor, or whether you're going to be a subcontractor, or before bidding on government work, make sure that it, again, doesn't make sense for your business. Given your costs, given the price points of the work, does it make sense for you to do the work? Are you going to lose money on it? How is the quality of the service or goods that you're going to provide? How is it going to be measured? And will you be able to meet those requirements? Do your people have the capacity to help perform the contract? You always want to ask yourself that, because signing up for something you can't do is only going to cause you heartache and grief. When you execute the contract, remember, as a government contractor, whether you're a prime or a sub, the government is considering your proposals, all of your representations about what you can do, your certification to certain acquisition clauses, that you're being current, accurate, complete, and truthful when you're making these sorts of representations. And if you're not, then the government can pursue you for false claims. When you get a new government contract, whether it's a prime or a sub, do like a contract kickoff meeting so that you can read through the contract together, so you can understand with your team what you're going to have to do, of how to perform, how to get paid, What are the compliance requirements that you're going to have to do? Invoicing, remember, when you invoice your prime contractor or you invoice the government, your invoices need to be current. They need to be accurate. You need to have adequate documentation to show that the numbers you're putting in your invoice actually are accurate and can be tied back to a product or to a service or work. Make sure that you know if your contract has particular timekeeping or expense requirements. The government says there's some costs that are completely unallowable that you can never charge either directly or indirectly to the government. So you have an overhead rate or a G&A rate that you use for determining how your costs, what are your overhead costs. For example, that cannot include alcoholic beverages, lobbying costs, and certain other things. Make sure to review again your invoices to assure that they're accurate, because the government will get very upset, as will your primes if you're not, as you should get upset with your subs if they are not accurate. I'm going to stop before I hit this last part, Curtis, to see if there's any questions we should answer.
We have one question that came in. When does it make sense to protest losing an award, and when should we not protest?
Oh my gosh. I am not a bid and protest lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, but so I'm going to take a pass on that. Other than to say, if like there's rank unfairness, then you should consider looking into what your remedies are. But I am not a good person on bid and protest. Okay. False Claims Act. I'm going to cover this in the last couple of minutes because this is like one of your biggest risks as a government contractor. The False Claims Act says that you can never, in any instance, present a false claim or a false statement to the government. But the government defines false very, very broadly. Failing to do due diligence, let's say you build up your invoices and you're not really sure if your invoices are accurate or you don't have documentation to support your invoices. The government may say to you, hey, we consider that false because you didn't do enough due diligence and your invoices are not accurate. False claims violation, submitting a false statement to the government, can be criminal and it can be civil. So I'm going to skip over this slide, but what you need to do, the government relies on your statements. So if you go ahead and submit your proposal and make all these representations about what you can do as a business, and then you get awarded the contract, and then you can't do it because your people didn't have the qualifications like you said they did, that is a false claim to the government. Making representations to the government that you can do something, that you're complying with the regulation, that your invoices are accurate, all of those things, if they're inaccurate, the government will get very wrapped around the axle and ultimately consider possibly an investigation and accuse you of giving them false statements. And with that, I made it through. Curtis, I'm happy to answer any other questions that may have popped up. I see, I'm going to jump in. I see this last question from Christopher Smith about large contractors who use subs have a place where they list their needs. I'm a former lawyer of two very, very large contractors. And what a lot of the really large ones, and I'm talking like Boeing and General Dynamics and Raytheon, they lots of times have a supplier or subcontractor portal. And sometimes those portals will give you a phone number or an email to their small business team. So really big contractors like a Boeing, for example, will have like a small business office where they're trying to find small businesses to contract with. So go on a big company's websites, look around for their supplier portal or their subcontracting portal or for their small business office. And they may have links to where to go for help or emails where you can write and say, I'm a small business. I'd like to talk to you guys about what I can offer. And then the final thing, and I think Curtis and Wendy can weigh in on this, the VA and other agencies lots of times have trade shows or meet and greets for bigs and smalls. And I think that is a great way to meet bigs and frankly, other smalls that you might want to do business with. I'll leave it with that with Curtis and Wendy.
Thank you, Margaret. And that's true. within the OSDBU office, we do have industry days or business opportunity sessions, one-on-one sessions.
There you go.
With our direct access program. And they actually collaborate either with the primes and sometimes the primes reach out to us to say we're looking for subcontractors that can provide a certain type of service, or those type of sessions are also held with our internal buyers so that they can be able to communicate to the community some of their future needs or even current needs that they have. So I do recommend, thank you for that, Margaret. I do recommend that if Curtis can post it in the chat. If not, give me a second. It's kind of hard for me to speak and type, but I'll post it in the chat for you to go over to Vet Biz. And Margaret, we did have another question. I saw if you had a little bit more time. I see that we are 2 minutes over. I think there may be something going on with Curtis' mic. The other question is, how do we negotiate with primes who ask for ridiculously low rates and net 90 terms? Like, do you have any tips for that?
Well, let me hit on the net 90 terms. Some of my clients are big businesses. I get net 90 terms as well, you guys. So that's a tough one. But there is a FAR clause that says that bigs are supposed to pay you guys, quickly and in a timely fashion. So that'll give you a little bit of protection. So Google FAR payment to subcontractors, and you're going to get the FAR clause that'll talk about how bigs are supposed to pay you guys timely and efficiently. So that may help you on your 90 days, but that's just standard for a lot of big businesses. As far as them pushing you back on rates, that's just hard, you guys. You got to just try to push back, tell them your value proposition, number one, know in the back of your mind that they need good small businesses to team with, because as I said in this presentation, big primes under their contracts with the government are required to work with small businesses. So know that you have a little bit of a leg to stand on. Do your market research and know how much of a leg to stand on you have. And those are my best advice on that negotiation. It's not easy, but hang in there. And trust them too. Make sure you trust your big prime, right? I know the big primes are huge and you don't, you develop a relationship with somebody there at that big prime. Make sure you trust them and can rely on them as well. Wendy, anything else?
I do see a few more, but we are 3 minutes over. So what's going to happen is that Curtis will follow up afterwards. If you guys give us, we're having a bit of a glitch with WebEx, so give us about 2 weeks, actually. It might not take that long to be able to pull up our report for the Q&A in the chat, and then we'll reach back out to respond to everyone individually, however you responded. There was one question, and this will end on that one. If they wanted to reach out to you, Margaret, and just for like a few questions or anything else, how would they be able to reach out to you? Is it okay if they, because I don't see a contact information slide on.
I know. I guess I forgot to put that on my thing. I'm going to put it right here.
And we can include it in the presentation too, Margaret. When we get ready to send it out, we can include your contact information on there.
Okay.
Can y'all hear me?
All right.
Can you hear me?
He's back.
We can, Curtis.
Thank you as always. I appreciate you, Wendy. Thank you, Margaret, as well, for your time and this wonderful information. This was great. I can't wait for the next one. Everybody, please fill out the survey. Let us know how we did today, and we'll see you next time at the next webinar. I hope everybody enjoyed their day. We certainly are in the DMV for some 75-degree weather finally. So thank you, and I hope everybody have a good day. We'll talk to you later. All right.
Thanks for your time, everyone. Bye-bye.